Cabin Sports Radio.
Here comes the siren. I want to go higher. Oh, my goodness. Will defend. Oh! LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal. Oh, baby, for sure.
Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Mike, I got one question for you to start off the show.
Hit me.
Team Biz or Team Cars? Who you got?
Team Biz.
Team Biz! I was going to say don't answer that, but there it is.
Yeah. I had to think about that for 1 second. I'm sorry.
If you've been following hockey Twitter, stuff got messy.
It did.
Just downright messy.
Yeah.
This past week. A little bit before the weekend. I guess just mostly over the weekend.
Yeah.
Most of it came out. We'll talk about that. We'll let you know what's happening. Again, if you're not following, it's almost too much to keep up with at this point.
Yeah.
So we'll try and break that down. Lots of other stuff happening in the world of sports. NBA All-Star Game. We'll talk a little bit about that. And some more hockey stuff. There's a lot of stuff happening in the NHL right now. It's not just the countdown to trade deadline anymore.
Right, which is next week.
What's going on right now is kind of making that seem boring, quite frankly. So we will get into it, but first, let's take a look back at this past week's headlines with Cabin Sports Radio News. You can hum along this time if you want, Mike.
You're listening to Cabin Sports Radio,
Yeah,
brought to you by
just,
Sport North, moving sport forward.
Just in case you forgot.
Just teeing it up.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Well, we actually start with a pretty sad story. Former Toronto Blue Jay Tony Fernandez passed away over the weekend. The five-time All-Star died yesterday at the age of 57 following a battle with kidney disease. Fernandez, who spent most of his career at shortstop, played 12 seasons over 4 separate stints with Toronto and remains the franchise leader in games played, hits, and triples. He was also a member of the 1993 World Series winning team and was inducted into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame following his retirement. So pretty sad news. Over the weekend, Buck Martinez, current play-by-play announcer for the Toronto Blue Jays, who played with him, Tony Fernandez, in the 1980s, referred to him as the Gadget Man. You know, the guy that can always just dip into that bag of tricks and pull something out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw you had the nickname listed there. I was like, I
Gadget Man.
did not know that one.
He had extendable arms.
Wow.
Yeah. No, but, will go down, still is often viewed as one of the best infielders in Toronto Blue Jays history. What he did on the defensive side of the ball, but also, still the franchise leader in hits and triples, tells you what he was able to do at the plate as well. So, and certainly one of the most popular Toronto Blue Jays of that era. A lot of people will remember the 92, 93, 94 seasons. And it's funny, like over 4 different stints. I'm sure a lot of people are happy that he made his way back for 93 when they won their last World Series.
Yeah, I wanted to get a hold of our old pal Tom Rominski there. I don't know if you saw, he posted a pretty nice story about Tony Fernandez and his take on his fandom and what Tony's career and as a Toronto Blue Jay meant to him. Mm-hmm. Didn't get a hold of him. There's just I'm sure Tom's always got a ton of stuff going on.
Oh yeah.
But hopefully maybe next week on Cabin Sports Radio we can get Tom on to talk about that. And I assume the continuing fallout of this Houston Astros fiasco, which will no doubt give us fodder for weeks to come.
Oh, yes. A lot more to come in that regard. Let's shift gears to basketball. Team LeBron edged Team Giannis 157-155 in last night's revamped NBA All-Star Game under a new format honoring Kobe Bryant. The league's best engaged in a surprisingly competitive affair that was ultimately won by an Anthony Davis free throw. Los Angeles Clippers forward Kawhi Leonard earned the first ever All-Star Game MVP award in Kobe Bryant's name for his efforts. The reigning Finals MVP posted 30 points and connected on 9 three-pointers in the win.
So I didn't see any of it. What was the new format? Just that it was called like the Kobe Bryant All-Star Game or something?
So a lot of the weekend, from the Rising Stars Challenge in Friday to the all the special events like the slam dunk contest, 3-point contest, the skills competition on Saturday night, and then the game itself on Sunday, all in some way, shape, or form or another. There was shout-outs, honors made to Kobe, and David Stern as well, who we touched on in an earlier show, former commissioner of the National Basketball Association, known mostly for making the game as global as it is now. So sort of remembering both of them in any way they could with special tributes, montages, guest appearances, singers. But specifically speaking about the All-Star game, so they had 3 quarters. The first 3 quarters were timed, so 12 minutes as per normal, but they reset. So you're starting at 0 at the start of every quarter.
Okay.
Team LeBron picked one charity. Team Giannis picked another charity. So at the end of each quarter, the team that won that quarter wins $100,000 for their charity, and then you reset. There is, however, the cumulative aggregate score at the top, so that they could award an ultimate winner. So you do that for the first 3, and then the fourth quarter, there's no running clock, and they just the team that
just
was
play
leading
till everyone gets tired.
Well, I thought I was in store for a really short quarter.
Yeah.
I thought, oh man, 24 points, they're going to score that in no time.
Yeah.
So what they do, the leading team, which is Team Giannis, they add 24 to that, and that is the target score. So the first team to that score, which happened to be 157, wins the game.
Oh.
So they had 133 points after the first 3 quarters.
Yeah,
and
that
they
adds
were
up. Yep.
Yeah, good math, eh? And Team LeBron was trailing them by 9 points, so they had to overcome that deficit and then still hit the 24. And that was, of course, in honor of Kobe Bryant, who wore number 24.
Right.
What it resulted in was an extremely competitive All-Star game. Not really the first 3 quarters. And they had a graph at one point, the amount of dunks in the first 3 quarters. It was like 42.
Right.
In the fourth quarter, 1. Because Kyle Lowry took 2 charges, which is absolutely unheard of. Guys were beaking at each other. There was reviews. There was shot clock violations. What? There was intentional fouls. Teams were in the bonus. Like, it actually felt like a playoff game. It was it was weird.
Huh.
And
so the NHL's just watching like, why? Why can't we do this?
And apparently it was actually Kyle Lowry, Toronto Raptors guard, who went to Adam Silver, the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, with some of these ideas. There was a lot of course, following the death of Kobe Bryant, people wanted to honor him in any way they could, and sort of revamping the All-Star game. So one team wore all number 24.
Okay.
One team wore all number 2 for Gianna Bryant, his daughter. That was her number.
Okay.
So they did it right, and a lot of people were really happy and kind of amazed to watch an extremely competitive All-Star game when we're used to watching Slam Dunk Fest. Yeah. Basically.
Man, that's and even a Slam Dunk Fest, and it's still arguably the best All-Star game out there.
Yeah.
And they found a way to make it even better.
Yeah.
Look at that.
It was pretty cool. So like I said, I was kind of expecting a short fourth quarter. I ended up pretty much watching, as did everyone else, a playoff game.
I mean, that sounds like great television.
With the best players on the planet.
Jeez.
It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Let's shift gears to hockey. The Edmonton Oilers are already without Connor McDavid and James Neal, and now they'll have to make do without another top liner after Zach Kassian was suspended for 7 games on Friday. Kassian, now a repeat offender, was punished for kicking Lightning defenseman Eric Cernak in the chest after the two got tied up during a play last Thursday. The Windsor, Ontario native will also forfeit over $165K in salary.
You know, even though it wasn't obviously that bad, like, you know, Cernak is fine. He looked like it barely fazed him when it happened, but you just don't do that.
No.
You know, like, I just wonder what is going through Zach Kassian's head in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it, 3 players were tangled up. There was another Oiler who kind of lost his balance and took
underneath.
took out both Kassian and Cernak. And then Kassian said after something, that Cernak was holding his leg and he was just trying to get free. It was like, that's not how you do that.
No.
You have a sharp blade on the bottom of your skate.
Yeah.
You don't kick someone. Like, you You learn that, when you're like 6 years old in hockey. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get that.
I think I saw the replay without any audio, and I just sort of caught it like a glimpse just in the background.
Yeah.
And right away, like, and not even as a hockey player, that's just a no-no.
Yeah.
And like you said, it wasn't a blatant kick, but
No.
it was clearly an extension of the knee and therefore the leg. He did clip him in the chest, and Chernak said, it wasn't that bad, but I mean, had it been any higher, it would have been a whole different story.
Well, yeah, it's just the principle of extending your leg at an opponent with your skate.
Yeah.
Like it's just, you just don't do that. It's just a boneheaded play, regardless of whether or not it's in a vulnerable spot or not. But yeah, I mean, and I'm sure it was one of those kinds of situations where it felt like they were tied up for like an eternity kind of thing. But when you watch the replay, it was like 3 seconds maximum.
Yeah.
The play was still there. It's not like the Lightning were getting an upper hand or anything at that moment. But yeah, just a complete brain fart on Zach Kassian's part.
So a fourth career suspension, you don't have to go far back at all. We all remember, of course, he was suspended for 2 games earlier this year for roughing up Matthew Tkachuk of the Calgary Flames.
I'm a lot less confused about this suspension than I was about that one.
Yes. But it kind of just got me thinking about some of the worst, and I don't know if you'll remember this one. Chris Simon, back in 2007, then member of the Islanders, with that nasty step on the foot of Jarkko Ruutu. That resulted in a 30-game ban, and I think that's right under Raffi Torres, I think, for the longest suspension ever handed out by the NHL. But I saw some montages of some of the other stepping or kicking infractions.
Right. I remember Chris Pronger, I think, had one with Anaheim.
He had a bad one.
Yeah.
So, when blades are involved and there's people on the other end that weigh in excess of 200 pounds, that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
So that's a no-no. Don't do it.
Use your stick, not your skate.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of suspensions, Evander Kane was also slapped with a ban over the weekend. The Sharks forward was suspended for 3 games for elbowing Winnipeg's Neil Pionk in San Jose's 3-2 win on Friday. Kane, who's been suspended 9 times in his career, heavily criticized the Department of Player Safety for what he calls a lack of consistency after the decision was announced. Kane will also forfeit over $110,000 in salary.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. A little bit more about that later in the show, because he had a whole statement about it that was, I think, can only be really summed up as a hot take.
Yeah.
Definitely looked like he just punched it into his like iPhone notes application and fired it off.
Published that tweet.
Yeah. All right. Well, but we'll talk more about that. And I particularly actually, and shocking to me, really liked Brian Burke's take on it.
Oh.
So I got that audio. So we'll play that.
We'll hear that.
About that a little bit later on in the show.
All right. And as you alluded to off the top, with MLB spring training on the horizon, the Astros cheating scandal continues to cast a dark cloud of controversy over the league. Several prominent players, including reigning league MVPs Mike Trout and Cody Bellinger, believe the league's punishment doesn't go far enough. Houston was fined $5 million and forced to give up multiple draft picks as a result of the elaborate sign-stealing scandal. But Commissioner Rob Manfred stands by his decision to not strip the club of its 2017 title.
An interesting conundrum there, because what do you do if you do strip them of that title?
Yeah.
Obviously we know that was not won on fair play and fair competition. Mm-hmm. But what do? You just, remove it and pretend it never happened? Like, I suppose that's an option, but does that necessarily make good on anything that's happened? Like, I don't really know.
And we know that they're not going to strip the Astros and then just present it to the Dodgers. I don't even think the Dodgers would like that. And so obviously Cody Bellinger, one of the players named in this, he was very he picked his words very carefully. Yeah. But he was really upset with the Houston Astros organization.
Fair enough.
Basically implying that Jose Altuve should walk from Houston to New York and hand deliver his 2017 MVP award to Aaron Judge, who he believes he stole it from. And the same goes for the title in 2017 when the Astros beat the Dodgers. Mike Trout, MVP as well, saying it doesn't go far enough. And Justin Turner, another infielder for the Dodgers today, really calling the commissioner into question. I think the commissioner said something along the lines of, it's just a piece of metal. Like the trophy is just a piece of metal.
Yeah.
To which
convenient.
Which ironically named the commissioner's trophy. To which Turner said, no, like every single guy in this clubhouse, every single guy in every other clubhouse in the league is playing for said piece of metal.
Yeah.
So don't devalue it.
Well,
is basically what he was saying.
And also, it's just it's such a disingenuous, naive slap in the face to all the things that surround that quote unquote piece of metal. Like, how about the pitcher who got lit up in one inning, and has been buried in the minor leagues ever since. And I think he's suing now for multiple millions of dollars. How about the multiple pieces of metal that he's got cheated out of now because unbeknownst to him at the time, he was pitching to a stupid disadvantage. It's such a convenient response. Like any other time going into the World Series, you're not going to say, get out there and pretend you care about this piece of metal. Just feign it for the fans. Give them a good show. And earn your money. It's just a piece of metal, though. Who really cares? Like, it's such BS.
Yeah,
really.
And another thing, just really rubbing people the wrong way, is their pretty unapologetic approach to this whole thing. I don't know if you heard the comments from Crane, the owner of the Astros, basically saying it didn't win us ball games. It had no effect.
Yeah,
our players knowing exactly what pitch is coming, where and when, had no effect on the outcome of the game. And then
which is just ludicrous,
right? And then you've got Bregman and Altuve taking questions from reporters too, saying, "I just want to put it behind us. I just want to put it. But we did something really bad. We're going to move on. Put it behind us."
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Yeah. We did, however, from Carlos Correa, another infielder with the Astros, get our first potential explanation for why Jose Altuve did not take his shirt off. You remember that now infamous video of him telling his teammates after he hit easily the biggest home run of his career against Aroldis Chapman to send them to the World Series. I think was that 2017? It would have been 2017.
So, yeah.
So in the year that they won it all, and where his head is at that time is, no, don't take my shirt off. Please don't take my shirt off.
Right.
Correa saying that it was a conversation that his wife had with Altuve's wife, and he wasn't supposed to do that. He didn't want him to take it off. He also had a really bad unfinished tattoo that he was not prepared for the world to see. So that was our first possible explanation for that incident. And it's clear as day. He's coming down after hitting a huge home run. Where his head's at is, no, don't strip my shirt. And then also saying, and this is fair, they did win Game 7 on the road. So they were not stealing signs on the road that we know of.
Right.
I don't know if there were any trash cans being battered in Los Angeles, but that was his defense for that as well. So anyways, it's in the news now because pitchers and catchers are reporting. We've got spring training starting next week, I think, like mid next week. So it is still that dark cloud, though, that just hangs over the entire league. Obviously, other teams still not happy. The manager for the Astros imploring that the league reprimand any teams who throw at Astros players, which I'm sure a lot of people want to do right now.
Honestly, like how could you not? And are the repercussions? What are you going to do?
Yeah,
like honestly, other than what's in the rules of the game, they get beamed, they take their base.
Yeah.
How are you going to enforce anything? Like obviously, that something is coming.
Yeah.
Not to Yeah, obviously nobody wants to stoke the flames any more than they already are because they're about as hot as they could possibly get. But to think that coming into this season, there's going to be everything's just, everyone's going to put it behind them and it's just going to be as normal. Like, no. There's not a chance that that's going to happen. No. Incidentally enough, and kind of ironically, I feel like the higher ups in Major League Baseball have got to be kind of watching this, and they know that this isn't going to have any, aside from a couple lawsuits. But I mean, it's Major League MLB. They've got tons and tons of money. Mm-hmm. They're not worried about a few lawsuits that come out of this and settling that. That's small potatoes for them. You got to be thinking though that they know all the attention that is on their league, and obviously the heat is still there, but the ire from I think most of the casual baseball fandom, like viewers of the games, I don't think that the anger is so intense now that it's going to deter anyone from watching.
Right.
And if it is, I think there's a whole whackload of casual sports fans who could give or take watching any games on TV. Mm-hmm. I put myself in that camp, who won't be able to help themselves,
right?
But watch and see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
This is kind of becoming must-watch TV because of this ridiculous scandal that's been blown wide open.
And there was another player, I think it was another Dodger, saying that this is worse than the steroids.
Oh, it's
steroids scandal, right?
It's 100 times worse than the steroids
This is
scandal.
Completely premeditated cheating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because there's at least with the steroid scandal, there was the angle that you could take, that you could like reasonably take, where it was like, well, why don't we just allow that? You know what? If guys know the risks, if they want to do that to whatever, like to enhance their careers, and it means that the fans get rewarded to, watching someone potentially hit 150 runs or home runs in a season, like, is anyone going to be that upset about that? Yeah. Like, obviously, like baseball purists who look at the records, and historians won't like that because it completely skews everything that's happened in baseball's history. Mm-hmm. So that's not a good thing. But there is at least the argument that it's like, well, it's their bodies, it's their health that they're potentially affecting. Doesn't really affect anyone else, and we all know that that's what people want to see anyway. They want to see him sock a few dingers.
Sock a few dingers, bud.
So there at least is that argument. This one, you can't. There's nobody saying, well, why don't we just let them all steal signals? Right. It just ruins whatever integrity that is still left over from potentially allowing players to just juice up and get as monstrous as they want to get. That is completely out the window, in this argument where it's like, you can't just allow cheating.
Yeah.
And especially in the World Series. Yeah. Like it's 100 times worse, at least, than the steroid scandal.
There are a few things better than October baseball, but I think there will be a ton of eyes when the new season kicks off. And I'm really curious, like, we're going to see how teams react to it. I bet you in the first week of action, I'm going to have to watch their home opener or their season opener.
Honestly.
There are going to be some guys getting plunked, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
But how are the fans? Like, any shred of credibility that these guys had, and for the longest time, like, they did it the right way, right? It was right around the time of the Houston flood, so it was a good story. It was a feel-good story for a city that needed it. It was their first professional sports win in a long time. Yeah. I don't know, the 90s. You have to go back for the Rockets.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about the Texans. So it came at a good time, and it was part of this new exciting rebuild they had going on with guys like Correa and Altuve and Bregman, who were the future stars, the faces of the league. Springer, you can throw in there, World Series MVP, and that all just comes unraveled now. And they're gonna have to face the music now. For the longest time, they're gonna have the eyes and ears of everyone on them, and any credibility they have has just been shredded. So, curious to see from a fan standpoint, like, do they boycott? I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean,
but there's going to be some reaction to this because it's that serious.
I mean, like we're just saying, I don't know why you would boycott, to be honest, unless you just think that the cheating is so ingrained and goes so deep that that there's zero chance of integrity in the game anymore. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's kind of one of those things where the players are gonna take care of it. Yeah. Kind of, like, obviously if every player from that Houston Astros team comes up to the plate and gets hit with a ball, it's going to come to a point where Major League Baseball is going to need to step in and say something. Mm-hmm. I still don't know if that's going to have any effect. Yeah. But I'm still going to be watching regardless. Oh, yeah.
And their stats are going to be under the microscope so hard this year, especially their home and away splits, and especially their home, because they would have obviously been inflated depending on how long this sign stealing scandal has been going on for. Those numbers are going to be juiced, the home ones anyways. And I remember seeing Altuve's numbers. There's a significant split from his home to away slash line. So it'll be pretty interesting to see, and people will be looking at them through a very, very fine microscope. They better get used to playing the role of a villain. Every single barn they go in, they are going to be booed mercilessly. But hey, maybe like the Patriots, who put a couple scandals behind them, they can probably shut up a lot of people by winning. But we'll see.
I mean, I don't know. Like, does that silence anyone? I don't know.
If they can do it legitimately.
Yeah. But how do you prove that?
3, 4, 5 times. Yeah, no, I know. It's all over.
Man. You know, two things that I don't think I've heard really anything about, but I'd be really interested to know more about is, number one, what Major League Baseball is doing, if anything, to put in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Because really, most of what we've heard as far as official statements come from the league has just been kind of like PR and damage control.
Yeah.
You know, there hasn't really been anything constructive moving forward where it's like, here is what we're putting in place to make sure that this can never happen again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it kind of seems like it should be a basic fix.
Right.
But the fact that it got to this point and is still, you know, there's still some suspected fallout and suspected other teams in the past, like even previous, that may have been doing the same thing. Like the fact that it could have gotten by so many people for this amount of time, or maybe it wasn't getting by anyone. It was just known by the right people.
Right.
You know, like it's hard not to have that suspicion and that, that just creep in. And you just got to wonder how far deep it goes.
And to be fair, like sign stealing has always been a part of the game. And it's usually if you get a guy on second who can sort of decode what the calls are from the catcher to the pitcher.
Yeah.
And even 2 years ago, the Blue Jays were in some hot water. There were teams that were accusing them of doing the same thing, of stealing signs. But obviously this far more elaborate system of focusing cameras specifically on it, decoding in real time.
Right.
As elaborate as it is, I still find it hilarious that someone's job was to sit in an alleyway and bash on a trash can because, you know, it is pretty elaborate, but then when we got to that part, it's a little barbaric. But then, you know, these allegations of these buzzers come out, which the MLB did find no evidence of, but I mean, that's still out there anyways.
Yeah. But, the other thing I would like to know, because you mentioned in that headline that Mike Trout and Cody Bellinger believe that the league's punishment doesn't go far enough. I'm kind of interested to hear what they think would be a suitable punishment. Is it, you know, like lifetime bans?
Right.
I don't know. Like, I mean, you know, you look at like Pete Rose is always kind of the one sitting on the sidelines, and you're like, are we going there?
Right. Who's now asked to be reinstated and brought back.
And why not?
Yeah.
Honestly.
This really looks worse. The sting isn't quite as bad for someone like Mike Trout, who, as fantastic of a baseball player as he's been, and still is, he's a generational talent. He hasn't had that playoff success.
Right.
But Cody Bellinger, and you could tell in his interview, it stings. Yeah. It stings for him. You know, the entire pitching staff, Justin Turner, you can feel the resentment, the anger that they have towards Houston because they did strip them of a World Series. So, you know, they're to the very far extreme that would probably like to see that title stripped. But like we said, it's just impossible to ever see that happening.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to a exciting season of Major League Baseball.
Maybe even tune in for spring training. I don't know. Like, even that could be good.
You know, it could be. Yeah, why not? Oh, I'm going to pay more attention than I ever have before. This is going to be great. All right. So we're going to take a break, and we will talk the good, the bad, and the ugly from the world of hockey. Coming up next on Cabin Sports Radio.
Cabin Sports Radio.
Cabin Sports Radio is always brought to you by Sport North. They are moving sport forward, and we are moving closer and closer to the Arctic Winter Games in Whitehorse, March 15th. And you can keep up with all of the action at sportnorth.com or at cabinradio.ca. Mike, did you see on Cabin Radio last week, Team NT did their uniform reveal?
I did see that with Mr. Williams.
Pretty snazzy.
Looking good.
You're not going to miss them in those pants.
No. Vibrant.
So if you want to check those out, what you'll look forward to seeing Team NT rocking in Whitehorse for the Arctic Winter Games. Again, you can check out cabinradio.ca, or I think the Team NT Facebook page. They should have them up there as well. We were having a little bit of a chuckle with the Team NT, the hoodies. They looked very 1993 retro, but that's all right. You know, it's they had the Aurora design all over it, just all kinds of colors, very colorful. Again, You're not going to miss anybody in those, walking around in those. So very high vis Team NT gear this year at the Arctic Winter Games. So we are looking forward to that. In the meantime, let's turn to the NHL. The good, the bad, and the ugly of this past week. The good.
Can I throw something out?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Leon Draisaitl.
Oh, what did he do?
Well, he is putting the Edmonton Oilers on his back. As we alluded to earlier in the program, Cassian now going out for 7 games with that really bad decision to kick someone with the skate.
Yep.
Connor McDavid actually nearing a return. He could rejoin the team. Yeah, they're saying within 2 to 3 days. So by the end of this week, he could be back, which would obviously be excellent news for the Oilers.
Okay.
I think the original prognosis was
like 3 to 4 weeks.
2 to 3. Yeah. Around 3 weeks. Yeah. James Neal has missed some time for a while now. I actually don't know with even one injury. I just know that it's hurting my fantasy chances. So that's how I knew. But Leon Draisaitl and his line with Yamamoto and the Nuge.
Yeah.
Playing really good hockey. And they're keeping the Oilers afloat. That Pacific Division is still pretty wild. No one's running away with anything.
Yeah.
They all seem to, like the top 5 teams, all seem to sort of win and lose together.
Mm-hmm.
So no one is making any ground. But I think they've got a 1-point lead on the division now with a game in hand with some other teams. Calgary's sort of tapered off a little bit. And I think if you're an Oilers fan, with those top-end guys missing, you're pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And you know what? I will add to the good. Speaking of the Edmonton Oilers, I don't know if you saw this, but last week the Oilers had a game against the San Jose Sharks.
Yep.
And rookie defenseman for the Oilers, Ethan Bear, scored just a really nice goal.
Yeah.
Just shelved it from tight in. And there was a really cool moment that a lot of people were tipping their cap to Brent Burns, because you saw just on a Twitter video, you just caught like a little clip of him skating by the Oilers bench, and he's clearly saying something to Ethan Bear, and Bear's looking at him, and you kind of see him get like a little bit of a smile on his face.
Oh, nice.
Nods at him, and you can see him mouth like, "Thanks, man," because I guess Brent Burns just went by. It was just like, "Hey, kid, nice goal."
Said something.
That was
nice.
a beauty. And so that was a nice little feel good moment, and just another reason to like Brent.
Brent Burns is a beauty.
Yeah,
So
he is.
we've come to expect that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so now let's get into the bad, because there's a bit of it.
Yeah.
The Stadium Series game between the Colorado Avalanche and the LA Kings this past weekend was, well, for lack of a better word, a disaster. And we're not even talking about the game itself. Although, I don't know if you saw this, Mike, someone tweeted out a picture of what their $350 tickets got them.
Okay.
They were right down, close to the floor, but all you could see ahead of them was boards.
Yeah. Perfect.
And you see it, they're like still like a rink away. And that's one thing I've kind of wondered about these stadium games.
Yeah.
What the sight lines are like, because even if you're in the first few rows, if you're at an NHL game, you're right there. You're right by the glass. But if you're in the first few rows of these stadium games, you're still like at least a hockey rink length away from the actual rink itself.
Oh, yeah.
So I always kind of wondered about that, if they had just like risers or something figured out to compensate for that. But this guy just had a direct screenshot of his line of vision.
Wow.
And all you see is boards. You'd get zero depth perception from one side of the rink to the other. So that was issue number one. There was also talk of parking nightmares, commute issues. There were people who left like a couple hours before the game to get there, and because of just the crazy traffic and logistics, they didn't even make it there till the second period.
Wow.
So, there were reports of fans who had
$100 value for their $300 ticket.
That's right, yeah, and barely
and then
even
they
that.
don't see anything.
And then they don't see anything.
What an experience.
And half of them just like turned around and just left because they knew, it was going to be just as bad heading back.
Yeah.
And so they were beating the traffic.
Wow.
Without even having watched the game. There was also reports of people who Had to park on mud hills because apparently the parking was just a complete mess.
Wow.
So basically, this was the NHL's answer to Woodstock. I think. Yeah.
They so as they do at the start of some games, they tried to coordinate an F-18 flyover.
Okay.
So there's clip,
and it crashed in midair.
No, there's a clip of this F-18 going over the stadium, and this is right around the start of the hockey game, and you can just see for miles and miles of tailgates. Because this is a secure military base, right? Like Falcon Stadium. So I guess not a whole lot of consideration given to, there's one way in, there's one way out, and there's 40,000 people who want to go and see this hockey game.
Right.
So
and nobody knows where it is because it's on an army base.
That's right. So really, really unfortunate. Like you said, people leaving really early, but clearly not enough. There are certain things you obviously can't fault the league or the venue for. The weather. It's going to be muddy in that climate. But I mean, from the concession, it sounds like there's concession disasters and washroom shortages. Just not a really good look. We were kind of talking off the air and making fun of the earlier outdoor game when who was Perry?
Yes.
Corey Perry was kicked out of the game and did that. What seemed like a 15-minute walk of shame because these people are so far. These rinks are encapsulated within another rink basically, and then you got the seating areas all the way further back. So, you know how many outdoor games there should be? I think there's 2 correct answers.
One, and it should be the All-Star game?
Or 0. I don't know. They tried to make this such a thing, especially in markets that it's not the most suitable for something like this. I do like the Winter Classic.
Yeah.
If you maybe have an original 6 city, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Maybe a more northern, climate.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, it's always the reason you get for it. And they had one in L.A., I can't remember if it was last season or 2 seasons ago, but,
it's the craze right now.
Warm weather, and you have an outdoor stadium game in L.A., and you always just hear the same thing. We're trying to grow the game.
Yeah.
We're trying to grow the game. How is giving an awful experience growing the game? Like, even if you have a good sight line, you're still so far back. Like, I don't think we realize until we watch these games on TV how tiny a hockey rink is compared to a football field.
Yeah.
Because then you have the end zones and the sidelines on top of that, and it's a fraction of the size.
You're not going to see a whole lot. To make matters worse for Avalanche fans, losing in the last minute to a team that has 3 regulation wins in the calendar year. So,
nobody had a fun time.
Pretty bad experience for Avs fans and everyone. Get more porta potties.
So continuing with the bad, Evander Kane, as we talked about earlier, was suspended 3 games by the NHL Department of Player Safety for an elbow on Winnipeg Jets defenseman Neil Pionk. Kane made a public statement criticizing the ruling, saying, quote, "The fact the Department of Player Safety headed by George Parros continue to pick and choose who and what they suspend is ridiculous." I mean, it's their job, but anyway. There have been countless incidents of this nature through past seasons that have gone unsuspended or fined. No one person can tell you what is or isn't a suspension in today's game. It's become a complete guess. There's a major lack of consistency with the NHL Department of Player Safety, a completely flawed system in so many ways. From the suspensions to appeal rights, it's baffling to me how we as players agreed to this. You can't continue to give some players a pass and throw the book at others. There has to be an outside third party making these decisions to remove the bias that transpires in this department, once again, headed by George Parros. None of it makes any sense. So Evander Kane has obviously had his issues with the player safety and suspensions in the past. I'm not really sure where and there's been talk of this over the course of this season, that there have been a couple incidents where people thought that perhaps it deserved a suspension. You mentioned the Kassian Tkachuk thing a little bit earlier on in the show, and that I think was kind of a prime example. People were wondering why Matthew Tkachuk received no potential supplemental discipline for his quote-unquote predatory hits on Zach Kassian, but yet Zach Kassian got two-game suspension for essentially defending himself after taking these hits. And there were a few incidents earlier in the season too, and I think the question kind of came up. And I wanted to talk about this a few weeks ago. I wanted to, broach the question: is the Department of Player Safety kind of starting to lose the room a little bit? And I mean, they give an explanation for every suspension that they hand out. They've for the last, I think, 5 or 6 seasons have each incident that they've reviewed, they've made a video and put it on NHL.com, and anyone can go watch it, and they break down exactly what they saw in the video, what their ruling is, and what led them to that ruling, whether it was due to prior incidents or just, intent of the play, that sort of thing. So you can't say that they're not doing their due diligence, but there has been, I feel like this year, maybe a little more so than in previous years, there has been a recurring question about consistency.
Yeah. Do you remember when Shanahan would come out with those videos when you were sort of anticipating a suspension?
Yeah.
And then he, across your Twitter timeline, there'd be Brendan Shanahan coming on, and he would always, break down exactly that, citing the league rule, the context in the game. I guess what I'll sort of refer to as case law, like what a similar type of infraction, how it was penalized in the past.
Right.
I generally find they're pretty consistent. And again, this coming from someone who's been suspended 9 times by the league now in Evander Kane. So you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Generally, I do find, though, and I don't know, maybe it's a matter of George Peros losing the room a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know some people have sort of thrown it in his face. Well, it's really ironic that this department is headed by someone who was your sort of typical goon when he was playing in the NHL. So a little bit of irony there on the part of some people. I find by the time that suspensions are announced, they're usually in line with what people are sort of expecting.
Right.
Especially if you waive your right to an in-person hearing and you do a phone hearing. However quickly a hearing is happening after a suspension, you can usually tell.
Yeah.
And insiders and analysts and pundits are usually pretty bang on whenever an infraction like this happens and providing a little bit of an estimate for what a ban will ultimately be. So I do think generally there's some pretty good consistency there. And they're doing their best to make the game safer. So
and I mean the game is constantly changing, and I think there is a different. Without question, there is a different frame of mind for certain incidents that would happen today as opposed to how they would be judged from like 5 years ago. Just to give a more recent example, like when I saw the Cassian, the kick, I figured 5 games.
Yes.
I figured no less than 5.
Yeah.
Just because it's such a potentially dangerous play.
Exactly.
But at the same time, there's no imminent danger in that one. Like where he hit him, it's okay.
And the force, it wasn't nearly as malicious as some of the, like the Pronger one or the Simon one. There wasn't that intent to injure.
Right.
It did look like he was honestly just trying to get him off him.
Yeah.
And
it's just a stupid way to do it.
It wasn't in a dangerous place, but it could have been so much worse if it was anywhere else and it was with any more force. So and that too, I think, was in line with what people were expecting. Anything less than really what was handed out, I agree with like the 5 to 7 range, but certainly not less than that.
Yeah.
I think maybe a little excessive if you're getting over that, but generally I find myself agreeing with the lengths of the bans.
Yeah.
Because I do think they are fairly consistent.
Yeah. One thing I didn't expect was to fully agree with Brian Burke and his take on this. Here's Berkey on Evander Kane.
Well, there are 3 issues. One is the suspension itself. And if you're going to bitch about a suspension, you better be right. Don't complain about this suspension. It's a legitimate suspension. So that's one. Number 2 is he suggests a third party should do this. How long would it take Evander Kane to hate that third party if a third party did it? First suspension that was handed down. Every league handles suspensions internally. They don't go to third parties. Football operations does it in the NFL and so on. The league fought for this in collective bargaining. They were asked to have a third party. They refused to do it. They've added a limited right of appeal. The third is the inconsistency and bias. Inconsistency, I think player safety has done a marvelous job with their videos explaining all the elements and components of every suspension. And any player that watches those videos knows what is and is not a suspension. And as to an allegation of bias against George Parros, who played in the league, played for me, played at Princeton, I think Evander Kane owes him an apology.
And I got to say, let me just stop that right now because that's not supposed to be playing yet. All kinds of technical difficulties on the show this evening. Anyway, to get back to Berkey's take there. I pretty much agree with him completely. And one thing I thought of also about Kane's statement about there needs to be a third party thing. And he said, what was it? Quote, "It's baffling to me how we as players agreed to this from suspension to appeal rights." If I'm Ron Hainsey, who is the Players Association player rep,
right,
I'm probably looking across the boardroom and thinking like, we were pretty open about this and pretty transparent about this, and this is the agreement we came to. So I don't really know why he's throwing that under the bus, that side of it, which would essentially like saying without saying, Ron Hainsey, you kind of messed up at the last CBA just because you're angry that you got caught for a 3-game suspension for an obvious elbow.
Right.
Like this should not be the time to die on that hill for Evander Kane.
I also find myself agreeing with Berkey, and especially citing the collective bargaining agreement, something that the Players Association would have agreed to with the National Hockey League. And I'll always go back to case law, right? And I think another, which I don't think he alluded to, is the fact that Evander Kane is obviously a repeat offender.
Yes.
At this point, with 9 career suspensions. So that's why you do have to take something like this with a grain of salt. But then all those other factors, and I think he was bang on. The players would have agreed to this. And how much would turning something like this over to a third party delay these types of penalties?
Yeah.
It's usually as quickly as the day after, right? If there's a Friday game, which was the case this time, by Saturday afternoon, they've come out with a decision. So you suddenly take that out of the hands of the National Hockey League and turn it over to a third party. I don't know how that smooths things over.
And I'm not sure how Evander Kane thinks that the result would be any different.
Right.
When you're taking past precedent into it,
right.
The history of a player as a repeat offender. And now, like you said, previously an 8-time repeat offender, now 9-time. Like, I don't know how he thinks this would turn out any differently with an independent third party, unless he thinks that George Parros is just actively trying to destroy the San Jose Sharks,
right.
or Evander Kane in particular. But anyway, that's enough of that. That's enough attention for Evander Kane. Now we turn to the ugly to finish things off.
Yeah.
So this whole row between Paul Bissonnette and Dan Carcillo, we opened up the show with it. You said you're on Team Biz.
I'm glad I answered that correctly, by the way, because I have to say, I actually didn't know what you were talking about.
Oh, really?
For 1 second.
Okay.
Because you shortened it. If you said Bissonnette and Carcillo, I would have been like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah, without question.
But Biz and Carc was like, oh. But happy to report I answered correctly.
So hockey Twitter erupted this past weekend. There was a Globe and Mail article that came out praising the self-made appeal of former NHL enforcer Paul Bissonnette, also known as Biz Nasty, for his Spittin' Chicklets podcast, to which known adversary and incidentally former teammate Dan Carcillo tweeted, quote, "Damage control after the fallout with Roenick." And I don't know if you heard, but NBC Sports made it official that Jeremy Roenick will not be returning as an analyst when he got into hot water over the holidays for comments he made on the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Yeah.
He followed that up by tweeting, "It's okay. Hockey needs someone to replace Cherry and Roenick." Biz, I guess that was kind of the last straw.
Yeah.
Because I guess Dan Carcillo, and I don't follow Dan Carcillo closely on Twitter, but I have noticed that he is, ever since he came out with the video of talking about his struggles post-career, his struggles with post-concussion syndrome.
Right.
He gained a lot of credibility and a lot of followers after that. And this is after a long career of being not a very popular player.
Mm-hmm.
he gained a lot of credibility, and he's done a lot of work since then to talk about and you know, continue the conversation about brain trauma and try to help and support and just bring more awareness to the situation. And I think we all applaud him for that. The problem is that Dan Carcillo also, he's got kind of this like dual personality thing on Twitter where he's doing this advocacy work for brain trauma injuries. And then the other side of him where he's just kind of like the moral, trying to be like the moral compass. Police of everything that happens in the NHL. And he just calls people out and trolls people. And Biz Nasty took exception to that.
Yeah.
So he fired back, making some very inflammatory insinuations of not only overtly racist behavior on the part of Carcillo while they were playing together, and even going so far as to say that Carcillo had a locker room robe he wore during his playing days with a swastika embroidered on the inside hood. So, like, pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, and not exactly something you're going to just pull out of a hat. Like that, those are pointed...
pretty
insinuations.
Yeah, like so, very, very specific kind of things. Carcillo he's since responded in a couple videos, and the thing I don't get about his response is that he's acting as though he feels like this came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's like, you know, this article basically praising what Bissonnette's been able to do in his post career. You know, not saying anything about anyone else. It's just saying, look what this guy's been able to do.
Totally.
Considering this is a guy who played, I think, maybe 200 NHL games in his career.
A pretty unremarkable NHL career, but he's...
all things considered.
Been able to carve out a pretty successful post-NHL career for himself.
Yeah.
Developed quite a following with his Spitting Chicklets podcast, probably the most popular hockey podcast there is around. And so maybe there's, you know, a part of jealousy on the part of Carcillo because he's been able to be pretty successful in his post-NHL career. But, yeah.
And I think that, maybe that is part of it. I don't really know. I think Dan Carcillo maybe just needs to figure out what he wants to be in his social media persona. If that, I mean, you know, Paul Bissonnette has made no bones about it. He is putting on a persona. He's basically putting on like a larger than life pro wrestling type figure of who he actually is. And from reading the article, that actually is kind of who he actually is. But for some reason, Dan Carcillo decided he had a problem with that.
Right.
And Paul Bissonnette did not hold back. And I think we're running out of time here, so I just wanted to make kind of an end point because I do really appreciate the work that Dan Carcillo is doing, bringing more awareness to concussions and brain trauma, and you know he's going around, he's delivering speeches to schools talking about this sort of thing and talking about mental health, and I think you know that's something that we talk about a lot here on Cabin Radio. That's something that the conversation always needs to continue surrounding mental health. So I do think he's doing very positive things around that. But his point is that he has changed. He has worked really hard to change from the person that he was. He acknowledges that he was not a good person in the past, and he has done that. And I absolutely think that he has done very well to make those changes to his life. People can absolutely change for the better and, you know, should absolutely try to encourage others to do so as well. But in the end, I think Carcillo may want to take just a different approach than trolling. I think that's what it comes down to. You can't expect others to see your side in a positive light when you toss the match on the bridge before they even have an opportunity to step across. You know, because if no one had given him that chance, he wouldn't be doing what he is now because everyone would have washed their hands of him, and that would have been it. Yeah. So, hopefully, the ugly side of that, has come to a close because, as you know, a couple people pointed out on Twitter as well, feel like Biz and Carse would be better as allies than as adversaries. But regardless.
And I don't think the NHL needs any more accusations of racism in locker rooms.
No
more of that.
I think they'd be okay with no more of that. Yeah. Anyway, that'll do it for this episode of Cabin Sports Radio. Talk to you next week.
Trade deadline.